Oh, hi. Thanks for joining me here in the shop today. I want to show you today how to patch a hole in a sheetrock or wallboard wall. Now, if your house was built or remodeled from, say, 1960 on, chances are this is the material right here that your walls are made of. It's a layer of plaster in here with a layer of paper on both sides. So I'm going to show you how to patch this, because oftentimes something like a swinging door, the doorknob itself, can cause a hole in the wall. Very common. Sometimes angry people can cause a wall. Anyway, so let's get started over here. First of all, here's our wall. I'm going to make a hole. How's that? Step number one, we're going to measure that hole, and we're going to make the patch for this 1 inch larger all the way around than the hole itself. So I'd say, in this case, a patch about, 5 by 5. That would be in order. So let's go over here. I've got a piece of sheetrock. All right, so I'm going to measure in 5 inches. There we go. And come down this way 5 inches. And just for clarity, you don't have to do this. You can just go right to the cutting. But I'll just draw this on here so you can visualize it. So there's our patch right there. Now you notice what I'm doing here? I'm cutting the patch first. And then we're going to cut the hole in the wall to receive this, and I'll show you why in a second. Now, the way to cut sheetrock or wallboard is to use a really sharp utility knife and just score the paper on the front like this. Then all you have to do is kind of bap it on the back like that and finish scoring on the back side, and this breaks right off. No need for create any dust when you're cutting this stuff, and this is the only tool you need to cut sheetrock or wallboard. Okay, like that here, and just pop that off. Right, so here's our patch. I'm going to take a felt tip marker right here, and I'm going to mark a T right here. That means top. And I'll show you why we did that in just a second. So now we want to place our patch. And you see the patch is larger than the hole. I'm going to place the patch over the hole with the T on the top, and I'm going to trace the outline. Okay. Now we're going to cut that out. And to do that, I'm going to use a sheetrock saw. Its design really has for just this purpose, cutting wallboard. You notice it has a very sharp point right here. That is so you can put this in position, twist it a little bit, and push it, and it will punch itself right through the wallboard. So let's cut down here. Here. Okay, and then we'll go up here. Now, because I use this as a template to draw that hole, I'm assured that it's going to fit in there, okay? And the reason I put the T on the top is that sometimes this isn't perfectly square, so if I don't do that and I try to put it in this way, it may not fit as well. So this just always orients the patch to the top. Now, obviously, if I put it in right now or try to, it would fall inside the wall. So we have to put something in here to support the back of this. And there are a couple of ways to do this. This first way I show you is it requires a little scrap of wood, like this, a drill and a couple screws. Set this inside the wall, hold on to it with your fingers, and then we're going to screw that in through the sheetrock. Come on. Actually, it's only when you I would hold that with my other hand if I had it free. There we go. Okay. And I'll put one down here. And then when we'll cover these screw heads up later on so they'll be totally invisible. Now, see, you've got a way to keep the patch from falling inside the wall. Now there's another way to do this. Let me take this out. If you don't have a piece of wood, you can just use a scrap of sheetrock. Okay, stick that out. Let's go over here. We'll cut ourselves a little scrap sheetrock. Again, score the front. Oops. Score the front, break it. Score the back, break it. Now, in this case, I would put a little joint. Well, let's just go ahead and do that. This is joint compound. This is the stuff that fills the joints between pieces of sheetrock. It comes in a, let me turn around here for you. I'll usually buy it in 1 gallon cans. Now I like to work from a joint compound pan like this. And I'll tell you why. Most of the time you want to load your putty knife on the front edge so it's really easy to pick up just a little bit of material like that if you've got it in the pan here. It's also easy to clean your knife off. So this is one thing I would definitely invest in if you're going to do any wallboard work. Now this is our backer board. I'm going to put a little bit of joint compound on that, just a thin coat. All right. And then the magic ingredient. Oops, that's a little misshapen. Let's try it again. I've got one back there already blown up. My wife said, I think you better do that in case you run out of breath. All right, so this is a balloon, by the way. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this balloon to hold our backer board in place. The pressure of that balloon pushing this way will hold this in place until that joint compound dries. And the advantage of this method is you don't have to use any screws, and you don't need to use the separate wood material. All right, so now we've got our patch. And I'm going to go back over here and get a little more joint compound. Obviously, we can't leave it. Well, let's put this in first. So I'm going to put a little joint compound on the back of this. Okay. I'm going to stick it in place. Okay. More joint compound, and what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put a strip of joint compound all the way around that opening. Now, generally speaking, anytime two pieces of wallboard meet each other, you have to span that joint with some kind of material. You can use a woven mesh tape, or I just like to use the paper tape for patches like this. What I'm going to do is tear off 4 pieces, and I'm putting them in water here. The reason I want these slightly wet is that they will adhere better to that joint compound, and there's less likelihood I'm going to get an air bubble. All right? Now, when you take them out of the water, this is important. We don't want to have too much water. Take your fingers and just sort of take off the excess water like that. And then we just lay this right on here. See how nicely that kind of draws into the joint compound? Now, I'm going to overlap this just for the moment. We don't want to leave any tape overlapped, because if we do, we're going to create like a bulge in the wall, which might be noticeable under certain conditions. Right. Put that on. And I had one more piece here. There it is. Okay, so we got the tape all the way around now. I want to get rid of that overlap, so I'm going to take my putty knife and place it right on the edge of the strip on the bottom, and then just tear it off like that. And I can do the same with the piece that's extending over here. So again, we don't want any double layers of tape. Oop. Now, you know what? This is reality video. You know, things happen. I'm going to push this in there a little bit. I should have done this anyway. Just taking the putty knife, I'm pushing the tape well into the joint compound. Make sure it's not going to move around on us. All right, do this again. I'm using this like a knife in a way, or a straight edge, just to rip this excess tape off. All right, a couple more. You know, I always debate when I do demos like this live whether I should pre-do some of this. But then I figure, well, then you're kind of jumping over some stuff that maybe somebody would want to see. So I'm trying to do everything from scratch today, and it just takes a little bit longer. Okay? Now there's our patch. Now, patches in the wall cannot be really done in one day. They can, but you have to use special materials for that. Because this compound has to dry. So what will happen is tomorrow, I'll come back. Just get a little more compound here. I'll come back. I'll do a light sanding on this. And what I like to do is I like to put on just enough compound to cover the tape well, and only have just a few ridges like this left. I don't want to, that'll cut down on the sanding that I have to do, which will make it much faster. By the way, you don't have to use sandpaper to sand this. You can use a wet sponge that's well wrung out. That will eliminate any dust. All right, now I'm going to move up to a wider putty knife, about a 6-inch knife. This is, I'm going to fill that center section. Now this is tomorrow that I'm doing this, so normally that would be dry, I wouldn't sand it. But this putty, this wider knife, allows me to kind of feather this out now. What I want to do is I want to taper the compound from the edge of the tape into the wall, so that we won't notice that. It won't show as a bulge on the wall. Remember, this is something you have to wait and do the next day. I mean, I'm doing it now with it wet, but ideally it would be much better if this had dried. Okay, get the idea? Down here.
Hey Ron, there's a question.
Yeah.
What grit of sandpaper do you suggest?
Oh, probably 100 would be good. Maybe you could even, I've even used 80. It shouldn't take much sanding, just light pressure. Just take these little ridges off, and then look at it. If you've got little low areas that need to be filled, then you skim on another coat. It's possible you might have to put 2 additional coats on. It depends on how the first one went on. But anyway.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
Shane is saying this is a harder way to do a small patch. What about using a tab patch?
A what?
Tab patch? I'm not sure. Do you know what that is?
Patch is. There is ask him if he's talking about the mesh patch. It just goes on self-adhesive.
Okay.
Looks
well,
like
all right.
like a mesh. Okay, I'm going to stop here now because the reason it's taking a little bit longer is because the stuff underneath is still wet. So, this would dry. Second day I'd come back, do a little light sanding. Once everything is completely smooth, then I can go ahead and prime and paint it. So I'm going to come back and try to answer that question when I find out what it is.
Okay.
All right, over here, I'm going to make another hole. Okay. I'm going to show you another way to do this without using any tape. Let's measure it again. I think about 5 inches here is going to be good. Yep, an inch bigger than the hole all the way around. By the way, one of the reasons I'm going to show you this is our first hole here. One of the reasons we want to have the patch bigger than the hole is always bigger on the back side. You see how all this blew out? So I want the patch big enough to replace all of this damaged sheetrock here. All right, here's our hole. 5 by 5, we decided. Or measured. Get this out of the way for a second. Grab another scrap of sheetrock. Let's try to keep my workplace neat. Sometimes that's a challenge. Now we're going to do slightly differently this time. Yeah, let's do it this way. I'm going to measure in. Make a couple of marks here. Where did I put my pen? Okay. Let me grab, oh, here it is. So this is 1 and 6. This is 5 inches in here. That's the actual size of our patch. But I'm going to cut this 1 inch, an additional 1 inch all the way around the edge, larger. So we'll go 7 and 7. And if you're wondering why, that's going to become very clear here in a second. All right, there again, just so you can visualize it, I'll draw our lines here. Okay, so this in here, I'll make these dotted lines. This is the actual size of the patch, okay, approximately. And down this way. And so what we've got here is an oversized patch. All right, one more line down here. Okay. So this is the actual size of the patch. This is the size of the material that I'm going to cut out. So let's do that. Again, we're going to score the paper with a sharp knife. Break it. Score the back. Down here. Break it. Score the back. All right, now I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to make a score line on the back here, 1 inch inside where we had that dotted line drawn, the actual size of our patch. Go all the way around. There are different names for this type of patch, but I've heard it called a California patch. Kind of cool, actually, but all right. Now I'm going to break these. This. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel this part of the wallboard off, and I'm going to be leaving just the paper on the front. Okay? And one more here. So here's our patch, and what we're going to be doing is we're using the paper on the face of the wall board as our tape. So again, let's put a T on this. Let's put a T on this for top. We're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to hold this up over the hole, right? And we're going to trace the outline of the patch. Just have to pull these flaps up a little bit so you can see what you're doing. There we go. And over here, get the last side. All right. So, here's our actual patch. We're going to cut this out. Now, one advantage to this method you'll see this in a second, is we don't need any backer board. Oops, I got a little big line there. There again, that's why we wanted to make the patch bigger. You see here, we just barely got it large enough. You know, it tends to take out a lot of additional material in the back when it breaks. We'll just check this. There's our T for top. We'll put it in. Okay. I'm a little tight right here. I'll make sure. Maybe that's. Just let me make this a little bit bigger. It doesn't really matter if the opening is a little bit larger than the patch. Obviously, if it's smaller, it's going to be a problem. The patch is going to fit in there. Okay, let's try this. Okay, there we go. Right, back to our joint compound. Let me put some more of this in the tray. All right. Now we're going to take, I'm going to put a little bit of this on the inside edge in this case. Yeah. A little bit here, and a little on the top. All right. Now, same as we did before, around the outside edge, we're going to put.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
Maylee has a question. What if the damaged part is next to a stud?
All right. Good question. There's an advantage and a disadvantage to that. When you're cutting your square out, if there were a stud right here in the center, it'd be pretty difficult to saw that completely out. So I would saw all the way around where the wall is hollow, and then I would take our knife and cut it right where it comes over the stud. Take the patch out. Now, if you've got a stud here, that's great, because when you put your new patch in, you can screw it right to the stud. So that's a time saver. Okay. Put this up here. Okay, we've got our joint compound. Now again, I like to dampen this. Probably the better way to do it would be with a little spray gun, but you can just use your fingers too. I'm going to get this wet so that it sticks better, avoids air bubbles. Okay, now remember we got that T there. Put that up here. Put our patch in place. It's going a little further than I really want. There we go. Now, see our. Let me wipe my hands off. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to grab a paper towel over here. Okay, now obviously I got too much goo on here now, so I'll clean this off and go over this. And I'm pressing the paper into the joint compound that I put on earlier. And this, again, I would leave until tomorrow, come back, do a light sanding, put on some more joint compound, feather this out to the edge, and when that's all dry and even, go ahead and do a final sanding, priming, and painting. So there you go, 3 ways to repair a patch. Now we had a question. Now, did we get clarification on that? You will find on the market drywall patches. They're actually, the patches are like a mesh-like material. They have an adhesive on them, and you simply place them over the hole and then cover them with a joint compound. Those are probably fine. I just don't feel that they have the strength of a patch like this. And if this hole was caused by a doorknob, there's a good chance it's going to get bumped again. So I go for one of these patches. This would be the strongest one over here, where there's actually a piece of either wallboard or plywood back there that's supporting this. So those patches are fine. That would be my only hesitation in using them. So thanks for joining me here in the shop today. If you like this, please share it with your friends. And if you know of anybody who's got a hole in the wall or may have a hole in the wall, they may find this very useful. So we will not be here next week because we have a project going that's going to keep us occupied all week. But we do plan to come back the following week. So I hope you'll rejoin us then.